my dear sister.
Hello.
How are you doing? Giving you a big hug.
So excited to see.
Lord, are you in London?
I am.
Wow. Beautiful. But thank you for this stuff. Can you see me all right? I can see you beautiful.
I can see all your beautiful books. Where are you?
Oh, I just finished class at 5:25 and I'm here at Union Seminary.
Oh, amazing. What were you teaching today?
We were teaching James Baldwin.
Okay.
Notes of a Native Son, the early Baldwin in the 1950s, 48 to 1955. Well, we had a dialogue, I'm telling you. That James Baldwin is something else. He is something. And he says, I walk into music, I write to music. I say, yes, we understand. We understand, brother. We understand.
Well, it's such a privilege to have you here today. Thank you.
No, but thank you so very much. Just salute you for all you are and do.
And you being one of the greatest thinkers of our time. Very excited.
Well,
dear friend.
If I could be to the world of ideas what you are to music, I would be doing some serious stuff. I can tell you that. No.
So, I was wondering if we could talk about Bonhoeffer today, as we had a little chat about him last time. What do you think?
Absolutely. Indeed, I got your wonderful words, your message, your text. We weave Bonhoeffer into both his love of music, him himself being a musician, and what that means in terms of music as a beacon of hope in such a grim time.
Absolutely. I was so interested by your comment about him seeing life through counterpoint.
Yes.
And the polyphony of life, and what a beautiful representation that is of all the arts and how they can all come together to illuminate each other and a way forward, right? Absolutely.
And then, Bach has this notion, what is it? Is it cantus firma?
Yeah.
Is that the right pronunciation of it?
Yeah. I was just reading about it today, actually.
Cantus-firmus. Yeah. Cantus firmus and cantus firmi. Yeah. No, that is so crucial for Bonhoeffer, though. He uses the language explicitly.
Yeah.
You were just looking at cantus firmus?
I was reading about Bonhoeffer and what music he really loved.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And he was really into Schubert and Schumann and Bach.
Exactly.
And sort of Bach to Wolf was how one article described, his level of breadth and understanding and involvement and appreciation and even performance of music, right? It was both.
That's exactly right. No, indeed. No, the music sat really at the center of his theological genius.
Yeah.
But so we'll get a chance to just zero in on that. That's dynamite.
Well, I was thinking as well, we could talk a little bit about how we met and love of Blake and genius and all that stuff. Because it's fun.
Good too. If anything you want to ask, we go for it.
All right. So do you remember all those years ago when we met?
I think it was many years ago. It was at Prestige.
That's right.
How many years was it? Would it be like 7?
I think 10, maybe even 10.
It could be 10, huh? Because that would be 2012. I started teaching 2012. You were a student then, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Isn't that something? Wow, look at you now. Unbelievable. So at least it's at least 10 years then. Can you believe that?
No.
Wow. But it's amazing, where we are now when you think of where we were a decade ago.
The world has really changed.
The world has changed, but we've been blessed enough to flower and flourish.
That is true, because we've had so much support from all of our friends, like William Blake, Beethoven.
Exactly. That's precisely right. Isn't that the truth? And concrete friends like family and loved ones that we can touch and hold. No, that's very true. It works on those different levels. It's just hard to believe 10 years passed by so quickly.
I know. You have the Bonhoeffer chair, don't you, at the uni? So that's a very special connection. So how is that given, and how did that happen? Is that just because of the general line of tutorship? How does it work?
It was a very deep thing, because there was a former president of Union Seminary named Donald Schreiber, who gave $1 million of his pension to Union once he was no longer president and was near death, just for the Bonhoeffer chair. He happened to be the same president who brought me to Union in 1977 when I was 23 years old. And so I heard I was when I had my challenges at Harvard, and Union came forward and said, "My God, we've got the chair open. We're looking for someone. Is there any chance that you'd be interested?" Then I got a call from him, Donald Schreiber, as well as the president, Serene Jones. And she said, "Good God, it would be wonderful to have you." And Don said, "My God, Cornel, we go back almost 40 years. Can you believe that the very thing I've been pushing for, you could be the occupant of?" And I said, "Well, that sounds downright providential to me. I better get moving. Better get moving, get back to New York." And that's how it be.
That's magical. Wow.
And Bonhoeffer's always been, one of the great exemplars for me. There's just no doubt about that.
And did his love of music influence how you felt about music to any degree? And how has music influenced your work?
But it's interesting because, I never realized how central music was until I just dwelled and immersed myself in the corpus, because I decided I would teach a course on Bonhoeffer every year, just being an occupant of the chair. So I read tons of books on Bonhoeffer, and I discover, wait a minute. Here's somebody whose conception of theology has music at the center of it.
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable. Who would have thought? So that's one of the things we can get into too. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And so that reinforced your love of music. And did you always have this love and understanding and appreciation of it? Where did it come from?
Well, no, for me, it came from my home and church and hanging out on the block with the brothers and sisters. Music has always been something that we breathe, we inhale and exhale. No doubt about that. And that was primarily, in the Black section of town, listening to rhythm and blues and listening to jazz. And then, of course, going to church every Sunday and getting that very rich gospel singing with the Silver Echoes at Shiloh Baptist Church weekly. And so music has always been at the very center of who I am. There's no doubt about it.
And theology is the center of everything that you do and informs everything that you do, right?
Well, certainly my Christian faith and Christian conceptions of the world sit at the center of who I am. There's no doubt about it. I have a little suspicion of theology, because theology tends to be a more abstract rendering of the consistency and coherence of the Christian faith, whereas I tend to think it's more something lived and conceptualized. And there I'm probably closer to Blake again. It's really the valley of imagination and the role of beauty and the role of truth and the connection of truth and beauty and the contradictions and incongruities that all of us have to live. Christian, non-Christian, Buddhist, Jewish, Hindu, whatever it is, secular, we're all shot through with these incongruities. and contradictions. And so I'm closer to Pascal and Kierkegaard than I would be to Aquinas, for example, or Whitehead, because they're actual theological minds trying to render it absolutely consistent and coherent. Whereas with Pascal and Kierkegaard, they're saying, there's a non-rationality, a trans-rationality always shot through it, and that we're more like poets than we are like scientists. Poets are much more concerned with how we use and mobilize imagination to authorize alternative visions of the world, knowing that whatever we do, there's always going to be contradiction and incongruity shot through it.
Yeah. And do you believe that we're accessing something greater than ourselves every time?
Absolutely. Very much so. Very much so. That I think a certain humility and fallibility is just built into any mature conception of what it means to be human.
I think that, Bonhoeffer was such a lovely place to start, because it brought both of our worlds together, and I thought that was a really nice thing. And I was so fascinated when you told me about him, because I had no idea about any of it, and it's just so illuminating.
What I know that Bonhoeffer speaks to you. So, Bonhoeffer is so much a Lutheran in a very subversive way, because it was Luther who said, God's two great gifts to humanity is the word of God and music.
Yeah.
And the word of God, he really meant Jesus. He didn't mean words of God in the Bible. He meant the words of the Bible that point toward logos, that point toward this Jesus of Nazareth and Jesus Christ. And so with Martin Luther, given all of his ugly stuff about what he said about Jewish brothers and sisters and women and peasants, that he knew that at the center of the human condition was this need to come to terms with suffering, moans and groans, and wounds and bruises and scars, and to transfigure it into a sound that could touch people's souls and open them to a love that always transcended their own mortal status. And so the love of God manifests in Jesus, and Jesus's love of the poor and oppressed always are inseparable from the raising of our voices in sound, the creation of beautiful sounds with instruments. And you remember what Bonhoeffer says? He says, he or she who does not cry for the Jews is not permitted to sing Gregorian chants. He said that in 1938, 7 years before he was executed by the Nazis.
Yes.
Isn't that beautiful?
Wow. Of course.
So, he was one of the few, even part of the confessing church that was anti-Nazi, but so many people in the confessing church were concerned about the purity of the gospel being contaminated by Nazism, rather than the gospel leading toward a genuine solidarity with suffering, precious Jewish brothers and sisters. And so for Bonhoeffer, when he talked about entering in underground activities, the seminary that he founded, writing the cost for discipleship, that great classic of 1937, that he connected it being genuine solidarity with the suffering. Yes. The Jews, German dissident voices, the communists, the socialists, the gays, but disproportionately the Jews. And so in that way, you can imagine, that when he talked about cantus firmus, love of God, and the counterpoint and the contrapuntal dimensions of that, it had everything to do with learning to live a life for others. To be a follower of Jesus is to come and die because you're willing to live a life for others. And that's a radical move.
Yeah.
Very radical move. That's like Jesus running out the money changers in the temple, which led toward his crucifixion. You see, we don't like to talk about that Jesus too much, but you can go to Rembrandt and get a beautiful rendering of it. But it's not too many persons who really want to come to terms with Jesus chasing out those money changers, not because Jesus hated the rich. He hated greed.
Yeah.
He hated callousness toward the poor. He hated indifference toward the vulnerable. And that's Bonhoeffer's conception of theology, what do you call the polyphony of life? Theology is a polyphony of life. Isn't that his dominant metaphor of what theology is? Centrally musical.
Absolutely. It's so incredible. And it feels so much less performative than, if you like, organized religion.
That's right.
It's a genuine, radical attempt and dedication towards true empathy against all the odds, right?
That's precisely right. It is the embodiment and enactment in deed and action of what our precious Jewish brothers and sisters would call hesed, steadfast love, loving kindness to orphan, widow, fatherless, motherless, persecuted, and subjugated. Yahweh tells Jewish brothers and sisters in covenant with them, what I ask of you, Micah 6:8, do justly, love mercy, walk humbly with thy God. Yeah. Do justly, mercy deeper than justice. Any justice that's only justice soon degenerates into something less than justice. You need something deeper than justice to keep it going. Deep mercy, love, compassion. Shakespeare says the same thing in Merchant of Venice, right? With that tremendous reflection on justice, but mercy must always go beyond the justice. Always cut deeper than the justice. See, that's the level of the human, not just the legal. That's the level of the human, not just the juridical, as it were. And that's part of the genius of Hebrew scripture that Jesus, of course, picks up on, but Hillel does, and the other rich rabbinical Judaic traditions do as well.
And the purer cause, right? Mercy is the purer cause, and therefore the greater and the deeper cut that you're talking about.
And it requires a kenosis, an emptying of oneself. It's like you on the piano. You're giving it your all. Yeah. It's like James Brown on the stage. He's giving it his all. Aretha singing. She's giving it her all. Brahms' Requiem. No reference to God, no reference to Christ. Reflect on the death of his mother. You can feel Brahms' heart, mind, and soul in it. And we haven't even got to Schubert yet. Oh. Yeah. D960, we could go on and on. It's all there. You know what I mean?
Of course.
You can just feel the emptying, the giving, the unbelievable willingness to push oneself. That's what kenosis is at its deepest level. Now, it still includes a mastery of craft and technique and unbelievable discipline, but in the end, it's going to be a soulful thing. It's a giving of something very deep in the dark corners of one's own soul. And as William Butler Yeats used to say, it takes more courage to dig deep in the dark corners of one's own soul than it does for a soldier to fight on the battlefield.
Wow.
That's William Butler. That's our Irish brother. Yes. That's why, when Shelley says poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world, that last wonderful sentence of In Defense of Poetry published after he died, that I would say musicians are the vanguard of the species, because they're the ones who authorize a different alternative reality by laying bare through sound and silence, between notes, through chords, resonant, dissonant, and so forth, ways of being in the world that can disrupt the dominant forms of hatred and greed and hypocrisy and envy, all the things that we wrestle with every day in our lives, that we actually have a kairos. There's a connection between kenosis and kairos, because kairos is the disruption of a chronos. It's the interruption of a routinized time. And kairos is this meaningful moment where that music is hitting, the sound is felt, the stories are soaking our souls, such that we can get a sense of what love and justice and community and genuine high quality relation and being sincere about one's own self, honest about one's own dark sides, all of that becomes manifest in the great art.
And
great
true
art.
vulnerability, right, is what
True
is required.
vulnerability. That's precisely right. And, Blake is one. Keats is another in the poetry. Is the musicality in Keats that's undeniable. Probably his greatest poem, to Autumn, is music's at the center of it, the auditorial dimension. Toni Morrison's Beloved, one of the greatest novels of the last 50 years. Musical to the core. To the core, not just in the language and the sound, but she writes it, she says, my novel, I want it to be the sound that breaks the back of words.
Wow.
Isn't that beautiful? That's Sister Toni Morrison. And she's coming out of, the blues tradition, Ma Rainey, Bessie Smith, all the way through, I think, the greatest, Sarah Vaughan. And she's going to sing Misty in 1964 in Sweden. I was just watching that with my beloved wife, Anahita, and we almost weeping. But when you hear Sarah Vaughan, she's singing a song, Earl Garner, that is breaking the back of words and touching your soul in such a way that you cannot but feel something deeper than the ordinary, a power bigger than you, no matter how agnostic or atheist what one would be.
Yeah.
And it's just nothing like it. But this is what all great art does. It's very much so is what all great art does. And Bonhoeffer, he has that music at the center, obsessed in some ways with Bach, probably more than others. St. Matthew's Passion, obsessed with the Mass in B minor, but the fugues and so forth as well. The well-tempered fugues at the very end, the offering of the later Bach right before his death. And it's interesting because when he's near death, he says, there's many biblical passages I can't read anymore. He says, they don't speak to me in a deep way. He even says, Rilke, one of the greatest poets of death and lamentations and lament, he said, Rilke doesn't speak to me because it's too individualistic. It's true that beauty is the first touch of terror that we can bear, that beautiful definition of beauty in the first elegy of the Dueno Elegy by Rilke. But he said, even Rilke doesn't speak to me. Well, who speaks to you? Bach. Isn't that something? And Lil Stiffner, the great poet of the 19th century. But he said it's Bach. I had wonderful discussions with Christoph von Dohnanyi, who was the great conductor of Cleveland. His father married Bonhoeffer's sister, Christine,
right.
his older sister.
Wow.
Yes. And so Christoph and I would steal away. He's such a magnificent human being. And just reflect on his father. His father was executed, just like Bonhoeffer was, fighting against Hitler, part of a plot to murder Hitler. And he was the godson of Bonhoeffer.
Oh, wow.
And that's one of the greatest conductors of our time was the godson of Dietrich Bonhoeffer.
That was the 20th of July plot, right? Is that the plot?
That's exactly right. Exactly right. No, indeed. So it's fascinating to see these kind of direct, and it's even more than just affiliations because music sits at the very core of it. So they thought he was going to be a classical pianist like yourself, more than a theologian. Yeah. They really thought so. What happened was he came to the United States with 2 PhDs in theology. He arrived at Union Seminary, right where I am right now. And he decided, he said, there's no theology here at Union. Everybody's concerned about justice and making the world a better place. But there's no connection with powers bigger than themselves. There's no talk about humility in the form of sin and just how wretched human beings can be, just the disasters that we can actually be. And so he went over to Abyssinian Baptist Church, where Adam Clayton Powell Sr., who was the father of the great Adam Clayton Powell Jr., was pastor. And it was in that Black church, he said, I heard the gospel proclaimed for the first time in America. And he became a member of the church. He taught Sunday school. He taught a woman's group. and preach from the pulpit. He's the only vanilla brother in a chocolate sea of Baptists.
Wow.
So when he went back to Germany, he carried with him recordings of Negro spirituals and gospel singing and so forth. And he would play that at his underground seminary there that shut down by the Gestapo after a few years. But it's interesting to see this wonderful connection between a German prophetic figure and the best of the Black church across the Atlantic Ocean, across the pond.
Yes.
Very, very much so. Very, very much so. But there's something about Johann Sebastian Bach. I'm telling you. Glenn Gould is not the only one who can have a profound appreciation of Bach and his legacy. And we thank Felix Mendelssohn and a host of others who helped keep it alive in the 19th century and thereafter.
That's right. That's right. And I suppose what I would love to know from you is what you see the role of music and the role of philosophy and literature and all of these things that are really one and the same and inform everything that you do and that we both do, I think, in many ways, in healing and directing the world that we have in front of us at the moment, and how you see that happening.
Yeah, line 607b5 of Plato's Republic in the last chapter, he talks about the traditional quarrel between poetry and philosophy. And he sees philosophy as trying to displace Homer. Homer had been the source of paideia, the source of deep education and shaping the souls of persons. He wants philosophy to do that in the Republic. And we know Homer's associated not just with poetry, but with song.
Right.
Because it was part of accumulation of a number of different voices in the oral tradition that then is written down. And so it's no accident Plato bans the flute in the Republic, you see, because the flute appeals to certain sides of the soul that he thinks are not rational, and we don't need that. Only the lyre with one string is permissible. And of course, almost all poets are banned in the Republic as well. Just those poets who will create poems, hymns to gods and hymns to great men. Why is that important? Because see, when philosophy is not cast over against poetry, but actually goes to school with poetry, it also means philosophy goes to school with music.
Yeah. Because
poesis goes hand in hand with creation of sound, as it does hand in hand with beautiful words. And so it connects the quest for wisdom as something that's always grounded in a quest for truth, beauty, and the good.
Yeah.
There's been a whole lot of talk about the truth, and beauty gets pushed to the margins. No. When philosophy goes to school with poetry and music, then truth talk goes hand in hand with beauty talk. That's why Keats is so important. See what I mean? Beauty is truth, beauty. That's all you know on earth. That's all you need to know on earth. Right? Because beauty all of a sudden now is so intertwined with truth in that way. And I would say the same thing about the good. And as a Christian, I'd say the same thing about the holy. Therefore, for me, any serious philosophical reflection is a quest for wisdom. And that quest for wisdom has to be broad enough and deep enough that it embraces a quest for truth, beauty, goodness, and even the holy. And in that sense, it means in the end, for somebody like myself, who's basically just a love warrior and a freedom fighter and a joy spreader and a wounded healer. That's what I aspire to be. That's my tradition. That's really where I come from.
What a quest.
No, it is true. That's Martin King. That's Fannie Lou Hamer. That's Harriet Tubman. That's John Coltrane's Love Supreme. That's Aretha. That's Stevie Wonder's Love and Need of Love. All of those Italian love warriors and freedom fighting and joy spreading. Louis Armstrong, who spread more joy than Louis? Oh my God.
Yeah.
Not just revolutionary, a master of his art, but always overflowing.
Yeah.
Almost like the Baal Shem Tov, just overflowing with a joy, overflowing with a love, overflowing with a compassion, you see. That's my tradition. And so in the end, I say, how do I keep the best of that tradition alive in a moment of increasing greed, hatred, hypocrisy, envy, polarization, dehumanization, people giving up on even communicating with each other? And it's a beautiful thing to find joy in keeping alive such a tradition, even as that tradition seems to be more and more pushed to the margin.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's why your artistry is so very important, so crucial. You see, because it's not just keeping alive, but ensuring that the great works on the piano, in the classical canon, remain vital and vibrant, and keeping that particular kind of bread of life fresh.
Yeah.
And then your connections with David Bowie. I mean, we can go on and on about how these conversations, the overlaps, become so very important. And it's done with a spirit of joy, a spirit of fallibility. You know, that we hear Sister Martha play the piano, we say, ooh, we've got to humble ourselves. You hear Art Tatum play the piano, you say, ooh, I've got to humble myself. And then you go on and do your beautiful thing on the piano. It's a magnificent calling. That's what it is. It's a calling. It's a vocation. It's not just ambition, not just a profession. No, and it's not just titillating and stimulating people. It's caring and nurturing for their hearts, minds, souls, and bodies. That's the key. That's the key. And that's what you manifest in the 10 years that we have been blessed to talk, wrestle with these issues, try to always accent the best of what our own callings are, no matter how sporadic it's been. It's been so episodic in some way, but still, it's just so, it's a wonderful thing. It really is.
And always a constant, even if we are not in the same place for a long time. It's always there.
That's exactly right. And of course, you're always in my prayers, and I'm in your prayers.
Of course.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for today. It's been such a great pleasure to have you.
That's a blessing for me. And you just remain the courageous and visionary, artistic genius and overwhelming talent that you are. And just always know that there's many people out there who have a profound appreciation of your gifts and the fact that you're willing to use your gifts to give to others. That's a beautiful thing, Sister Harriet. I'm telling you, that's a beautiful thing.
And yours too. Thank you so much. And we'll speak again very soon.
Absolutely, indeed. Stay strong. God bless.
You
God bless.
too. Thank you. Bye.
Indeed.